Tony in the Woods 3. By Hak Jin Kim. Tony in the Woods. In the cave, Tony, a high school freshman, nods and follows Jenie with Ben, a border collie. They walk to the end of the cave and Tony sees a wooden bed at the corner, which is surrounded by a tall fence and draped with fine mesh cloth. He wonders how the bed could be built inside the cave. "Jenie, don't tell me you worked on this wooden bed," Tony says, with a look filled with doubt. "Yeah, I did. Come this way. The cave has two entrances, the one you passed through and this back door. Building materials were brought through the back door that keeps from animals. And it gives on to the other side of this mountain. Maybe I can tell all the details later on," Jenie says. "Wow, you're amazing. Jenie, I think you're my age. Then, how does your education go?" Tony asks. "You know, I'm a high school senior. I'm living with a foster family. It's been almost 3 years to be with them. The nice lady, a single parent, allowed me to live until I go to college. You know what? I got a full scholarship to college. I don't remember about my birth parents 'cause I was raised in a foster care." Jenie answers without any emotion. Tony wants to ask her which high school she goes to, but he skips it and says, "I see. Let me ask you this. How could you climb the rock so quickly?" Jenie smiles and says, "I've rock climbed since my childhood." "Well, Tony, I want to be a friend if you let me." "Oh, cool. I'll hang out with you when you come here," Tony says. Jenie seems delighted a lot. Soon, Tony asks whether Jenie can join him for lunch with his parents. "Tony, thanks, but next time. Your parents will be frightened 'cause they can't imagine my situation." Jenie refuses his offer politely. After a little pause, Tony excuses himself by saying he has a lot of reading assignments to finish for his term paper. On the way home, Tony feels a little uncomfortable with Jenie, since he has never expected to have a friend in the woods. Besides, she seems to be different from other girls like Becky. Speaking of his curiosity, it comes to be a kind of bother. When he arrives at the cottage, he heads to the garden to check. His parents are working. He sees them planting some flowers and trees. Tony rolls up his sleeves to help them without saying a thing. He has no intention of talking about Jenie. Rather, he makes up his mind to keep things about her in secret. Jenie stands still watching Tony and Ben until they disappear from view. And then she enters the cave. After she locks the gate of the fence, she goes out through the back door and climbs down with agile legs to the lot, where she parked her scooter, her valuable transport, to reduce the time it takes to commute from the town to the cave. Jenie arrives at a small town, where she has settled down since she was placed and raised in foster care. It sits about 5 miles from Tony's hometown. In the town she heads straight to an indoor rock climbing gym to do part-time job as an assistant, though it starts about 3 o'clock. Every Sunday she works with the equipment and sometimes helps climbers in class. She feels proud of herself on her sports ability, which has been formed through her own efforts. Doing errands in many foster homes without any complaints made her body strong and agile. Thanks to her circumstances, she grew up as an all-around athlete. Now she is doing a good job in the team, winning on the track in high school, and surprisingly, she earned a full scholarship to college due to her straight A's. Sitting on the bench of the locker room while waiting for the class, Jenie thinks back to her childhood for the first time in years. Jenie remembers how she has been well behaved so far. She has never made any trouble and thanked each foster family for providing food and bed. But, she sometimes felt blue when she came to think of her sad life that she hadn't got the summer break most kids got. She worked part-time almost every day after school to make extra money. And every time she felt lousy. she overcame by running and climbing on everything in front of her. As she grew up, she saved up little by little and could afford to buy a scooter. With her scooter, she ran around neighboring areas and found the mountain, which seemed to be good for rock climbing. And while roaming around mountains, Jenie found a big cave covered with grass and small trees. Oddly enough, she thought it was her home. At first she thought it was a cave with rock formations, but it seemed like someone dug into the side of a low hill to make a dwelling place because of its lofty entrance and its spacious interior. After she checked that there was no trace of living things, including human beings, she didn't care what would happen next, and began to make a wooden bed and a fence with dried-up trees left around the cave. When she almost finished the bed and a fence, she happened to see Tony's family move in the woods and began to feel close to them. While stealthily observing the family, she began to have a feeling that the friendship with Tony will be worth to her. Since then she watched and followed Tony, and gathered some information about Tony whenever she stayed in the cave. She had no idea how to get along with him, but she just tried what she could do, like she had survived the world as an orphan. Now Jenie feels a sense of community that she had never experienced because she started her life in a foster home as an abandoned baby who was found at a social welfare facility. Though she knows that there are only 3 months left to spend with Tony in the woods, she considers Tony as one of her best friends, as well as a younger brother who she can see any time in the future. As the rock climbing class begins, Jenie busies herself with people in class. She helps trainees to grip rocks and guides how to step on a small rock to climb the wall. She focuses on what she is supposed to do, forgetting about all that happened in the morning. Meanwhile, Tony spends his time with Henry and Maggie, doing things in the garden. He focuses on working as if he forgets meeting Jenie at the cave. In the early morning, living in the woods is meant to be working without an idle thought. 3 of them work all day long, except during meals, and at sundown they sit at the kitchen table. Tony, you were a big help today. You're quick and powerful. Now, you're a man, huh? Henry says. Yeah, we couldn't do things that much without you. Tony, Maggie agrees quickly. I enjoyed it a lot, Mom. Oh, it's time to watch a baseball game, Dad. It's already started, Tony says, turning to his cell phone. They begin to get involved in their cell phones. They talk occasionally with their eyes fixed on their phones. The night grows dark, and Maggie says, 2 men, you should get some sleep. As the dawn breaks, Tony turns off his alarm clock as soon as it goes off and falls asleep again, snoring since he worked like a dog on the previous day. About an hour later, he just sits on the chair to have breakfast but dozes off hearing Maggie, who says that she is going to the town with Henry. Hey, listen. Tony, do you want to go? You can take Ben, Maggie says. To the grocery store? Tony asks with his eyes closed. Yeah. And we'll pick up a dog for Ben. We think he needs a friend for night in here. He must be scared when staying outside alone, Maggie says. Good for Ben. Yep, I'll come with you, though I have to skip my morning class. But I can catch up with it this afternoon. Today's Monday. So, I have time, Tony says. Henry drives his van to the town. They stop by at a grocery store first and then go to the house, where Maggie already called for the appointment to adopt a young, trained border collie, the same species as Ben. After picking up the new one, they put him with Ben in a pet cafe to have lunch before going back home. In a restaurant they talk about naming the new dog. Tony suggests that he'd like to call the new one Ed. Henry and Maggie agree with Tony about that. On the way home they pass a small town, and Tony looks out the car window at small-scaled buildings along the street. Jenie may live in this town, Tony says without thinking. Maggie asks Tony immediately, who's Jenie? I haven't heard of her. She must be going to the same school as you 'cause kids in this town go to your school. Really? I didn't know that. But it doesn't matter now. Actually, I don't know her exactly, so I've nothing to say, Tony shrugs. Yeah, okay. Anyway, this town is very small, so we can't help driving to our town to shop, Maggie says, turning her face to Tony. On arriving at the cottage, Henry begins to gather some leftover planks in the shed. He starts to make a doghouse for Ed and rework Ben's doghouse by putting a plastic waterproof cover over the roof and on the floor. Tony gives up taking online classes to help Henry. It takes up a whole afternoon to finish 2 doghouses. When they are done and placed side by side, Ben and Ed seem to show their gratitude by wagging their tails and licking Tony's hands. Hey, guys. I made this. Tony just helped me, huh? From now on, spend all your time together. You both don't have to worry about raining. Are you happy? Henry rubs Ben's and Ed's heads.